Man, wild night in college hoops last night. Wild stuff. Wild stuff. We got a lot to do. We're joined now, as we always are, throughout the big dance. Jon Rothstein, a good buddy. And John, of course, CBS Sports College Hoops Insider, writes for FanRag.com. John, how are you, buddy? What's happening?
Good, guys. Good to be with you.
Always a pleasure. We'll get to the replay. We'll get to the Oregon, that malfunction. Talk about narrowly averting disaster. Let's get Georgetown. Let's start with this, though. Some coaching news. I know you've been working the phones, digging some stuff up. The way they worded their release, the University of it does not seem at all as if John Thompson III had any choice in this decision. Am I right with that?
Yeah, you're 100% right with that. And, obviously when stuff like this is sensitive, it's couched in a certain way. People say, well, we're not retaining your services. We're pretty much terminating you. And this was something that was a result of Georgetown just losing momentum in men's basketball. And, I was talking with somebody about this really, yesterday. Georgetown's best player this past year was Rodney Pryor.
Good player.
But he was a graduate transfer from Robert Morris. When, over the last 30 years, have you ever thought that Georgetown would need to go to Robert Morris to get its best player?
That's a good point.
And, now moving forward, what we're going to see is, I think, for the first time in 4.5 decades, a shift away from the John Thompson regime. You think back to 1972, John Thompson Jr. was the head coach. Craig Esherick took over after him. He was an assistant. And, of course, John Thompson III succeeded Craig Esherick. And from everything that I've gathered, it's more than likely that the next head coach of Georgetown will be a shift away from that regime. However, it's still very important that the next head coach embraces the Georgetown alumni base. So it's a very slippery slope right now.
But it's important for every coach to embrace every alumni. Why is that unique?
No question. But in this case, you have to be in a scenario where you are not going to alienate the people that would support the program. And the people who support the program, the ardent supporters, are always going to maybe look towards somebody who's cut from the same cloth as the people who preceded.
Are you talking about a minority?
What?
I mean, is it that cut and dry?
I don't think it's
That's
that
what
cut.
it sounds like.
I don't think it's that cut and dry. I mean, Craig Esherick was not a minority, and he was the head coach.
True.
He was obviously tied to John Thompson. But I think it's more important to not obviously have somebody come in and clean up shop. We've seen, coaches in the past be in a situation where they get to a new job and they don't embrace the history of the place. You have to embrace the history.
What do you mean clean up shop? You know what I mean?
There's been times in history, Tiki, where people have taken over fabled programs and done things their own way and not embraced what happened before them. At certain places, you cannot ignore that. At certain places, you have to understand what happened in front of you and do that part of the job. So if you come in and you say that, we're not obviously going to be in a situation where we're going to be committed to recruiting DC, or not going to be in a situation where we're recruited to obviously making sure that everything happened here in the past 4.5 decades is going to be always forefront and center, then there's going to be a problem.
Why did the kids stop coming?
That's a good question.
Combination of things. I think, one of the things that I think a lot of people had gripes about with Georgetown was style of play. And I think if you look at the personnel that Georgetown had, Georgetown was built to run. Georgetown was built to be in a situation where they could maximize possessions, and we saw Georgetown a lot play a slower brand of basketball. Now, JT3, again, also I think, was a victim of peaking too early. Early in his career at Georgetown with Jeff Green and Roy Hibbert, he went to a Final Four. They lost a tough game to Ohio State with Greg Oden. That was 10 years ago.
2007.
Yeah, and they never got back to the second weekend of the NCAA tournament. And another thing, Tiki, and this is just based on over, a decade now of covering college basketball at the national level, when you lose momentum in college basketball, it is very difficult to get it back. And I firmly believe this. In 2013, Georgetown was a Final Four team with Otto Porter. And the game against Florida Gulf Coast, I thought, was the start of the downward trajectory of Georgetown. Gulf Coast was a 15 seed. Georgetown had Otto Porter, who everybody was raving about as the best player in the country.
He's turned out to be pretty good in the NBA, actually.
Yeah, no, I'm sure. But that game, that game changed everything. That game changed everything.
I remember BT saying at the time, you can't lose that game.
Yeah.
No, you can't. I mean, and not only did they lose, they were getting yoked on. It was a fast break layup line, dunk after dunk. That's an interesting. If you were to circle one moment, I think you're right. That's the symbolic drop off. That's a good call.
Yeah.
All right, so Jon Rothstein's with us in studio. Of course, Tiki and Tierney, CBS Sports Radio. We're inside the O'Reilly Auto Parts studio. Better parts, better prices every day. 2 segments with John. We'll get to the games from last night, preview tonight. John, our college hoops insider, CBS Sports Network. He writes for FanRag, is at FanRag.com as well. Now, I don't pretend to be an insider. That's not what I do. I never have been. But I did speak to somebody at Georgetown last night, and they intimated very strongly to me that despite what is being written, Patrick Ewing is just at this point a perceptual pipe dream, meaning Georgetown's not thinking about that despite what's being written. You hearing the same thing?
Yeah, Brandon, and you've obviously helped shepherd my career, and we've talked about this.
But yet you don't give me 10%. I notice.
Fair enough. But stuff obviously that's being written out of the gate is speculatory. And will Patrick Ewing potentially have a phone interview or even a face-to-face out of obligations? I'm sure he will. He's Patrick Ewing, but from what I have gathered right now, it's going to take Georgetown some time, and obviously we're going to have to find out if John Thompson Jr. is going to have a major hand or not in the hiring of the next head coach. Now, here's what I can tell you. We have talked about the criteria that it would take to be the next head coach at Georgetown, what that coach is going to have to obviously embrace. And there's certain things that only they are going to be able to decide is going to be warranted of hiring a next head coach. Tommy Amaker is from Virginia. Tommy Amaker is somebody who has always embraced strong brands in college basketball. He played and coached at Duke. He went to Michigan. He has made Harvard a program that, again, has won multiple games in the NCAA tournament. There are very few jobs that he would consider leaving Harvard for. And I've spent, annually.
I know you're tight with him.
A day.
Yep.
I've annually spent a day in Boston every year with Tommy Amaker. And he is set, and this is his dream. I'm telling you his dream right now. His dream is to play in a Sweet 16 at Harvard, have 4 or 5 days of media coverage and be one of these smaller schools, and to have a call at arms after a Sweet 16 game with all famous Harvard alumni sitting behind the bench. Natalie Portman, Mark Zuckerberg.
Natalie. Stop. You can stop at Natalie Portman. I don't need Zuckerberg, even though I need him for Facebook. Right. But stop at Natalie Portman.
But what I'm saying is he is somebody who has these dreams at Harvard, and he is on the cusp right now of returning one of the more talented teams that the Ivy League has ever seen.
So you're saying it's not happening?
No, I'm not saying that. I'm not saying this. I'm not saying this. But I am telling you this. These are the jobs that he's turned down. Cal, Miami, SMU. According to people in his camp, he has always been enamored with the Georgetown job. He's from Virginia. And again, I don't know yet if Tommy would leave Harvard. And this is one thing you have to realize, too. Georgetown right now has 8 players on scholarship. Georgetown has had mass defections already this season. They're obviously going to have to be active in the spring recruiting period. It is a back-breaking rebuild in a job where there is massive expectations. And you guys know this. The Georgetown brand is still strong enough to recruit nationally.
I know
the Georgetown brand is still strong enough to extend all over the country. So it's going to be a matter of whether or not Tommy would be even willing to entertain that.
It's amazing. And, I obviously lament, although I do think they're coming up. But, I wish St. John's was better. But to be fully fair, when you look at, where they were in the 80s and this national prominence, this incredible run, all that Big East, everything, Georgetown has done a much better job of maintaining their national profile. It's not even close compared to St. John's. But even saying that, it just seems like a job where you're always chasing the ghosts of the past.
Yes.
And that is not a fun endeavor for every coach. Not everybody wants to sign up for that.
Well, and the one thing, too, that I noticed going down to Georgetown, this past year is they opened a new practice facility.
That's beautiful.
And it's beautiful. But there is a massive shrine of John Thompson Jr. in the practice facility. Like, you're walking in every day, and you're seeing that. You're seeing a national championship in '85. You're seeing 3 Final Fours in 4 years. Every single day you go to work, there is a shadow, and it's a shadow that's looming large. And also, you can't be in a situation where, if you want to run practice, you tell that guy you can't come to practice.
I know. He's at every game.
He's at every game.
I see him every year.
It's his program. It's his program. And JT3 has said that.
Which is understandable, but not necessarily a good thing for growth. Jon Rothstein with us in studio, CBS Sports College Hoops Insider, fanrag.com as well.
Yeah, let's move to another opening. How realistic is Doug Gottlieb at Oklahoma State, our colleague here?
What do you think there, John?
I think this is what you need to look at when you look at the Oklahoma State situation. You have a situation where Doug Gottlieb is somebody who makes a lot of sense for Oklahoma State from a financial perspective because they can't pay somebody what they were going to pay Brad Underwood.
Yep.
That would be,
why not? They have a football team. They've got boosters. I keep hearing that they're poor. Why?
I hear it all the time, but I know that I know they're not because they have a good football squad.
Yeah. They don't have enough money to pay the coach.
Is this just not they don't want to?
Yeah, is it a prior? Yeah, is it an ability or not a priority?
And even if they don't want to, the question that follows is why not?
Yeah.
Well, here's what what you need to look at when
By
it
the way, who
comes
you
to
texting? Look at this guy's busy. News is break. If you notice John's a little distracted, it's because he's probably breaking a story.
That's right.
I got you, man. It's all good. Go ahead.
No, this is what you need to look at. Brad Underwood, okay, wouldn't be in a situation where he would have had to go on to Illinois if he was well compensated at Oklahoma State. That is something that you have to keep an eye on. Now, with that said,
But you
Oklahoma,
said that's the reason he left?
That's the reason, because it was all money.
But again, why?
There's
why do they not
there's financial issues right now.
Why though? They have a good football team. They've got a vibrant alumni base.
Look,
Where is
from
the
what
money?
From what I've been told, there is not a scenario where they're going to be able to pay top dollar for a coach.
Okay.
That's what I've been told. Now, here's the thing. Like, it doesn't sound like Oklahoma State's going to be in a situation where they can pay 3.3 for try and lure Buzz Williams from Virginia Tech. That's what I'm saying.
Gotcha.
So if you really split the atom and you look at potential candidates, if you're not paying somebody, okay, to be in a situation where you are going to be able to lure somebody for top dollar, you are going to have a scenario where, for all intents and purposes, somebody like Doug gives them the PR hit that they need because they're hiring a loyal Cowboy. Now, again, look at what they've just went through. They had somebody take the job from Stephen F. Austin, and then they had somebody leave a day after they lost in the NCAA tournament, okay, to Michigan. And Jawan Evans, as you saw earlier this week, they signed with an agent, declared for the NBA draft, and then Phil Forte, of course, who is a folk hero in Stillwater, also exhausted all of his eligibility. So look, think about how dire straits the program is in right now. Now, are there other candidates involved? Yes, but I mean, if you're not paying top dollar, then Doug has a puncher's chance, and obviously he's revered there.
I really hope he gets it.
Yeah.
I think it would be one of the more unique hires in the
it's similar
recent
to Fred
history of
Hoiberg.
college basketball.
It's similar to when Fred Hoiberg went back to Iowa State. It's very similar.
Sure. Yeah, but at least Freddie, had an NBA profile. I mean,
Sure.
Doug has been doing radio shows
Sure.
and calling games. But listen, I don't pretend to know Doug very well. When I do talk to Doug, I've always liked him.
I played in the charity basketball game with him, and he was
Oh,
trying
you
to tell me
he's still pretty nasty, right?
No, well, he's
No,
good.
meaning
He's
good, yeah.
but he's trying to tell me things. He's like, "Yeah, do this, rotate that." I'm
He's
like,
coaching even then.
I'm like, what the hell are you talking about? You're speaking Chinese to me.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
a football player.
But his dad's, his dad passed away sadly, but his dad, as you know, a coach. I mean, I have a lot of respect for somebody that reveres and is so open about their dream job. I hope he gets it.
Yeah.
And they love him out there. Like
Love him out there.
Now, if he doesn't, who else would get it?
That is something, Brandon, that
That you're working on.
You're working on. Like, I mean, because here's the thing: any sitting head coach with a great job or a decent job, if you're not going to be well compensated, why would you leave? And look, I spent time last night with Greg Marshall. Greg Marshall was in the studio with us on CBS
Was
Sports
his wife
Network.
Yelling at you guys while
She
you
was
were on
not
TV?
here. She was not here.
Just making sure.
But you look at right now, the narrative is much different in college basketball in terms of staying at a certain place and not having to chase the other side. The grass isn't always greener on the other side. I mean, Shaka Smart did it for a long time at VCU. Tommy Amaker has done it now at Harvard for 10 years. We also saw people, do it, obviously, like Greg Marshall and Mark Few.
Even a guy like Chris Mack. Do you think Chris jumps at all?
It depends what he's offered. From what I've been told with Chris, he would always entertain things in his region geographically much more than obviously something, a couple years ago he was obviously in the play for the Cal job. But I think geographically in his region is much more in his wheelhouse.